Very much. So this is the December 9th, 2020 Edina Planning Commission meeting. I see my screen slipping. For me, it's a big day. It's 79 years ago yesterday. My dad volunteered to join the Army. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Be all selfish for a second. Sorry about that. But we're meeting virtually to comply with the governor's stay-at-home order. And everybody can see and hear each other. If people wish to participate, you can dial 1-800-374-0221, enter conference ID 1042195, press star 1 to be placed into queue. And the participation tonight is if you wish to participate in the matter before us. We have one public hearing tonight, which is a sign variance at 3917 West 50th Street. So with that, I'll ask staff member Liz Olson to do a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Strauss?
Here.
Commissioner Bennett? Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Agnew?
Here.
Commissioner Miranda?
Here.
Commissioner Cullen?
Here.
Commissioner Berube?
Here.
Chair Nemrov?
Here, thank you. And so the meeting agenda was sent out on Friday, and it's available electronically on the City of Edina's website. Are there any changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Thank you. Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote? And for people who just participating for this meeting, you don't participate regularly, because we're doing this electronically, you're going to see a lot of roll votes, because that's the way we have to do to officially note who voted for or against or abstained from things. In an in-person meeting, we can just do voice votes, yay and nay. But Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Aye. So that the agenda has been approved. And then the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have any comments to those minutes? Anyone want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So
I move
moved.
approval of those minutes.
Then Joanna, will you second? Okay. Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote for the approval of the minutes from our last meeting?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Aye. Thank you, everyone. So that takes us quickly. It's 7:06, and we're on the fifth item on our agenda tonight. And joining us is Scott Neal, the city manager for the city of Edina. Hello, Scott. And Scott's going to go over our work plan for this next year. We put a lot of thought into it, and Scott wanted to present it to us and give us some of his underlying thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Carrie and I have a presentation that we're going to do together, I think, and it's unrehearsed. So this is you're going to get the pure presentation tonight. Let's move to the next slide. So this is a graphic. This is a graphic that talks that gives you some context about what goes into our work planning process. We believe that we try to do our best in being a work plan driven organization, meaning that we try to plan ahead so that we make the best use out of the resources that we that we have from the community. We use existing documents like Vision Edina, the comprehensive plan, our capital improvement plan, and our budgets to drive our work. And actually, it also works. It also works the other way as well. When we think about how we do our budgeting in Edina, we are generally talking to our commissions and our council about what is it they want us to accomplish. And then we as staff try to put a price on that. And that price is really what gets translated into our budget. Next slide. So our two-year budget work plan has annual work plans for commissions. It has annual work plans for different departments, and even all the way down to our annual work plans for individuals as well. So tonight we're just talking about our work plan, and we're doing this kind of presentation to all of our commissions this year as a wrap up to the board and commission and work plans being approved by the council at the last meeting. So the board and commission work plans, all our work plans really are driven by kind of four fundamental goals of our city budget and our city operations. A strong foundation, these are foundational goals for our city. Strong foundation, excellent service, livable city, and better together. And then we fit our work plan goals and initiatives under those four headings. Council values statements. These are what council feels about in its community engagement, sustainability, and equity. These are three broad categories that we are putting into all of our different work plans. So all of our public works and fire department and parks department and community development department, all of them will have some sort of goal or work plan that's associated with community engagement, sustainability, and equity. So this is the commission work plan calendar. You can think of it like a cycle. In January, the new work plan begins. This work plan is the one that was just approved by December 7th. So our work planning process really starts with commissions, right? So commissions get together sometimes in August, September, and they create what they would like to do, what they think the community needs. And they put that into our work plan format, and they make that presentation, well, to themselves, first of all, until there's a consensus on the commission. That work plan, however, then gets transmitted to the council directly by the board and commission chairs. So the individual chairs, there's an evening of work plan presentations where the chairs, one right after another, present their work plans to the council. They do this in an unmediated way without staff comment. We think that's important so that board and commissions get to have like I said, an unmediated presentation to our council, so council has a chance to gain an understanding of what the boards and commissions want to do. The next thing that happens in that process is that staff take those proposed work plans and we take them in-house and we do a review and analysis of them, and we try to do an assessment of what's the demand on workload. What do we already know, for instance, about Carrie's workload for 2021? How are the things that are being requested in this work plan going to impact the community development department, communications departments, other departments? So we look at, I get to know the things that you don't see, right, in other departments, and we try to do a sense of what we think is a work plan that can be completed in a year, can be completed by the folks available, and can be completed with the quality that people in Edina want to see our work completed. Then we make our recommendation on those work plans, board and commission work plans, we being staff at that point. We make our presentation to the council in another work session, and then council thinks about it. And then the first meeting in December is typically the council meeting where the council receives the final staff recommendation about board and commission work plans for the upcoming year, and they approve them. So what they are presented with at that point is the staff recommended work plan. We take questions and answers from council. We modify work plans sometimes contrary to what the staff has asked for, but most of the time they're adopting the staff recommendation for work plans. Those get adopted in December, and then we start the cycle. We start the cycle over again. So themes of recommendations in this year, we talked a lot about cross-commission committees. We talked about the difficulty of cross-commission committees, and we have a lot of requests for them, and we had some experience with them last year. But just in terms of scheduling and getting times for busy people to come together for cross-commission committees, we found those to be difficult, and so did the people involved. We want to make sure that things are aligned, work plans are aligned with city goals, work plans, and resources. We want to make sure that council, staff, and commission roles are all set and appropriate. And finally, a number of events. We look at all the different boards and commissions and what their events they're scheduling. So special events, community events. We have a very thick calendar of community events in Edina, and so sometimes we've got to pay special attention to adding more to that environment, because sometimes we can't perform them all, or we just can't get a date that'll work for all of them, given given what else is going on in the community. And Carrie, is that it?
That is. Should I pull up the approved work plan then?
Yeah. Do you have the planning commissions?
I should have that here.
Is there any questions while Carrie's working on that? Is there any questions about our process?
Anyone?
I had a quick question, Scott. I know you were mentioning that the cross commissions, it's difficult to do, but so are we still trying to do that, or is it?
We are, despite it being difficult to do, we are still trying to do it. We find that
Okay.
commissioners yearn to do it. And we think from a staff standpoint, we like the idea of planning commissioners, parks commissioners, et cetera, all working together on a similar initiative. We just find them difficult to do. So we're trying to not schedule as many of them and be more picky about ones that we are scheduling. And we have one sort of that fits in that range that I want to talk about here in a little bit.
Okay.
So this is the Planning Commission's work plan, and you should recognize a lot of these actually. Initiative number one is review land use applications. We think you're going to have a busy year doing that in 2021, given what we see being discussed and sort of the whispers in the community about development. I think it's going to be a busy year. Initiative number two is planning study of the business park, Edina Business Park. That's one that's been particularly interesting to the council and to the community, I think, especially the development community. It's going to be a very important study to us, and we think you're going to spend a fair amount of time and effort and energy on it this year, because there are a number of property owners and developers in the community that are waiting for us to decide what we want to do with that piece of the community. Number three, review and recommend zoning ordinance changes. So what we did with this one is we added staff and council added priorities to the individual items that planning commissioners recommended. So we had a list, and I think we tried to split them maybe even into 2 years. But I think the first three, Carrie, is it maybe first 3 or 4 in 21 and the second group in 22? I can't see it directly.
So we've got, I'm not sure how this is showing on the screen, but we've got the parking regulations that we just had a work session earlier this evening on.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big one. We also, that doesn't show up, but it's a carryover, is the impervious surface ordinance. It's another very important issue that we want to tackle. And then we've got the zoning ordinance change regarding basement requirements and the 1 foot rule. So we'd like to accomplish those as being pretty important. We've got conflicting ordinances where, we want to lift new homes out of the floodplain, but yet we don't want homes to be raised more than 1 foot above the first floor elevation of the previous home. So we need to reconcile those two conflicting ordinances.
And there will be a lot of folks not only interested in, but I think who will want to talk to you about whichever direction we're planning to go with those items. Because I think people who build homes for a living know that those are controlling factors on what they can do with their work.
So that concludes. And Scott, did you want to talk about the items that were removed?
Yeah, I do. So there are a couple items that did not that staff did not recommend for the Planning Commission's work plan that are moving ahead in other ways. One was a work plan item that had to do with tree ordinance or tree protection ordinance more specifically. We had a number of boards and commissions that wanted to work on one version or another, or one aspect of another of an overall city tree protection ordinance. We've been talking about this and working at it a little bit at a time in different departments and different commissions. We wanted to put together this year a consolidated effort to take this on because there's a lot of interest in our commissions and a lot of interest in the community. So we've started the process of doing sort of a design process on how that might be done. We're looking at scheduling, especially in the virtual environment, a tree summit meeting with all our different commissions who are interested in this subject, and hearing from a couple of communities, a couple in Minnesota, one in Illinois, and one in Colorado, how they handled their municipal tree protection ordinances to get some ideas about how we could do it. Another item was regarding the robustness or lack of robustness of the city's transportation network. And we have had that discussion before as well. This year, we want to reach out, and I've already reached out to a fellow named Chuck Marone. Chuck is with the Strong Towns group. We've had Chuck in town before to talk about planning, urban design. He is a civil engineer by training and has a lot to say about streets. And I think he would be somebody we could have to come in for a training session that a lot of our boards and commission members would be interested in from a lot of different aspects. We had him in a couple of years ago for one of our urban design symposiums for an entire day. I think what we're talking about would be less than that, but having him back and answering questions and spurring some discussion, I think would be a great idea. So we are pursuing that one as well.
Carrie, Scott, that everything?
Yeah, that's everything. Can I answer any other questions about this process or about work plans?
Jerry, do you have a question?
Yeah, for Manager Neal, just a quick one. The individual we were just talking about, was that the consultant who was from Ashland, North Carolina?
No, that Commissioner Strauss, that was Joe Minicozy.
That's okay.
And we had Joe the first year of our symposium, and we had Chuck Marone the second year of the symposium. And I think some of you might have met him. But if you want to see examples of his work, he's easy to find online, on social media, on Twitter. Strong Towns is his organization.
Thank you.
One of the funny things I've seen with Chuck Marone is not funny, but funny resonating to experiences that I've had while serving on the Edina Planning Commission is he talks about feedback he's gotten regarding traffic and stoplight delays and parking requirements. And then he says, and roundabouts, and he says, well, this was in like northern Minnesota. A northern Minnesota town was giving me a hard time about lengthy commutes and wait delays at parking. And he was giving this elsewhere. I mean, it just shows the universality of these issues.
Yep.
And it's great because he does have this small town and big city depth of experience that makes him good at that kind of information. Gives him a lot of credibility.
He has really built a national reputation as a big thinker in urban design, urban planning, especially in the transportation world. And he lives in Brainerd, of all places, right? So getting him down here for a meeting is something we negotiated it, and he's really not very expensive. So yeah, we're talking to him about doing something like that right now.
Other questions for among the commissioners?
Another one I might add is that it doesn't show up on the work plan, but we had a lot of discussion about training for planning commissioners. And also with 2 new city council members coming on, we thought we would, in the first quarter, do a joint training session with both the planning commission and the city council, kind of that land use 101, kind of maybe 201 training session. And then, as we've talked about too, we want to look at other opportunities for training individually for planning commissioners. So we'll be doing that in 21 too.
And I think you probably all know by now we have a new city attorney, David Kendall, who works at Campbell Knutson, replaced Roger Knutson as our city attorney. We have committed to the city council that we are going to do a competitive request for proposal process to make a long-term commitment to a city attorney in the first quarter of 21. So you'll be hearing more about that too, because you all have a greater connection to the city attorney's office than some of our other boards and commissions.
Regarding training, I was speaking with, I won't out him right now, but before the meeting about training, I've had conversations with a few members. We went to training, 6 of us went to training at WSB University a few years ago. It was probably our favorite. The city attorney's training is okay once. I'd rather not have it again because someone new perhaps, although I think Kerry covers a lot of that in his orientation, and I think we're going to talk about improving orientation programs separate from that. Kerry, I think aren't you searching for, I don't know if obviously WSB University is not open right now, but are you searching for other opportunities? We have several new members that haven't really received much training. It'd be great to get them.
Yeah, I've been doing some searching and there's just not much out there right now, even virtual type meetings. Unfortunately, the staff member at WSB who put those on and was very good at it is no longer with WSB. So I'm not sure what they'll be doing with their university once it opens again. Maybe they have additional staff members. I could reach out to them and see what opportunities might be there.
Are there APA materials that might be worthwhile to distribute to people as kind of a tutorial?
There may be. We've got that book that we talked about, The Role of a Planning Commissioner. We've got a couple of copies of those. We can circulate those for the commission. I can also, just as a refresher too, just send out the training materials that Campbell Knutson have put together. It's something that you could scan. Maybe some of you still have those, but that might be just a good refresher here in the interim.
I think another source of training, though, Mr. Chair, that we're looking at for council members, and I think it might be just as relevant for planning commissioners, is a course of training that is offered by the League of Minnesota Cities on behalf of the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, right? So the League of Minnesota Insurance Trust is the entity that insures us and insures our land use decisions. So every time we get sued by somebody for a land use claim, they're the ones that have to defend us and pay the bill. So they have developed over the years a training session that's primarily oriented for city council members about how not to get sued, right? How to analyze and make wise decisions within the parameters we have as a Minnesota city. So they may have they may have been starting to include planning commissions and commissioners in that sort of training too. So we'll pursue that to see if that's a possibility as well.
I think it's a great idea. Every training program I've ever received from an insurance company, for a commercial insurance company, has been good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're motivated.
They are very motivated. Very motivated.
Okay, a couple other things. If anyone has their slides from the WSB, if you could forward them, maybe we could share them. That would be useful. Jerry and I have looked for ours, and we're just coming up. We can't find them right now. Maybe we can return to this. Any other questions regarding the work plan or the things that were removed? Any commissioners? So I have a philosophical battle going on inside my dome, and it might be my heart versus my head. And this is a ever, and ever continuing thought, and I think my thoughts have changed even within the last 36 hours. Even after, and maybe even change after our work session tonight. Pure logic shows to me that that we have this that kind of like a small area plan for the business district, and we have this parking issue, which I think is, if anything, more complicated. Our path is now more complicated now than it was 2 hours ago. I think, or more work intensive than it was 2 hours ago. So I look at that and I say that's a lot of work. And on the other hand, maybe that's kind of like my cold brain. But on the other hand, I kind of have my heart going and saying, well, but boy, there's just so much change going on in the world right now, and the pace of change is accelerating. And even since we did the comprehensive plan, boy, the world and our community has changed greatly in terms of the pandemic and work from home and economic crisis. And the city of Minneapolis, I love the city of Minneapolis, but it's in a lot more precarious condition than it was 12 months ago, and what the effect of that will be on Edina. And I just feel like, boy, on the one hand, you got, boy, that's a lot of work, and those are meaningful things. I mean, the other thing we wanted to look at was a transportation study for Saltdale, and that's going to come up again in future years. But so I see we have a lot of work right here. But on the other hand, I'm saying, boy, we're really living in interesting times, and are we doing what we can to think through these interesting times and position Edina to come out ahead or come out, optimally? And so that's kind of my battle, Scott. And Carrie, I don't know what other commissioners think, but I just thought I don't have a solution, because I kind of see both paths as being reasonable. But I'm just throwing that out there to see if anyone else has any feedback on that.
We are living in interesting times. One of the impacts of those interesting times that we're seeing on our end is we're fielding questions and having meetings with developers that we've never worked with before, and they're meeting with us because they were doing work in Minneapolis and now they want to do work in the suburbs, and we're one of the places they want to work. I think you will get pressure. You'll have a lot of interest and pressure when you do the business park study, because there's going to be those types of people that are looking for answers for that too. I mean, we already know, and we had to say no to a couple of proposals in there because we just didn't have the sanitary sewer capacity. But we're going to be having more of those in the future than we do right now. And we'll have some proposals for 6,600, 6,800 France, 7,200, 7,250 France. I think we'll be back at some point. The county has decided to back off on the Southdale Library planning process, and they want to start from zero again. So there's another thing where we got to find sites for 2 fire stations. There's a lot on our plate that will eventually be on your plate at one point or another.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't know. Does anyone else have any thought on that? I had one final thought, but anyone else have any commentary or questions? Okay. The other thing I have, and this hasn't been as much of an issue this year, but in years past, let me preface this by saying I'm completing my 6th year on the Planning Commission, and I have yet to serve with my first dumb, unmotivated commissioner. Every single person I've served with has been highly motivated, highly intelligent. And so sometimes what happens, though, is you don't have rules or thoughts regarding every issue that's presented. And what I've seen in years past, not so much this year, but I've seen in years past is almost like rulemaking in the process of adjudication. In other words, a variance comes up. It's, there's a give and a get perhaps, and a balancing of factors that go on. But I've seen in the past where people sitting on the dais will say, well, you know what? I think we should have a rule for these types of issues. We don't have an ordinance, but I think we really should say, it has to be, it can't be more than X feet, or it has to be in this neighborhood, it has to be this kind of style, or it can't curve by more than X degrees. And I often feel that's a hard path to go down, because while that commissioner may have thought about that issue extensively, the other commissioners haven't really had the opportunity to think through that issue or that potentially new rule, nor has the applicant. I often find it unfair to the applicant, because for two reasons. One, they have to comply with a rule that they didn't know existed before they showed up at the meeting. And two, I think a lot of our applicants, if they had known of the rule, they could have, in advance, they could have come up with much better solutions for the issue than when the rules just brought to them at the meeting. So one thing I've been trying to do over the past year is tell people, let's not do that. Let's not create new rules, but let's put it in the parking lot and then try to add it to our work plan. Well, I'm completing my first year as chair. Maybe my last year, we'll find out what the future holds. But I don't know if we can necessarily say that in the future. I don't know what that, Jimmy's waving bye-bye. I don't know if we can necessarily say that. So maybe this is a question to everyone or a comment to everyone, but to a city management too. I like to think about how we actually deal, because these issues are real issues. These are smart people, motivated, wanting to do the right thing, come up with things. And I'd like to come up with a way that we capture those ideas and build them into rulemaking processes without just having an informal rule, which reminds me so much of how I used what I used to face when I tried to get medical products cleared in China. Where all of a sudden I read the 93-page guidebook, and all of a sudden they'd say, "Oh, but that's the hidden rule. And by the way, it might go away if you take me out to dinner." So that's just there. I don't know if you have anyone else has any thoughts on what we can do about those types of things that come up, how we avoid them, how we avoid creating new rules for applicants when they come before us, and how we capture the thoughts behind those new rules and figure out how to bring them into the rulemaking process. I'm done.
This is Jimmy. I have a couple things to say to reflect upon that. First, I think back to, a few years ago, items you mentioned about when more of that happened. I think a couple things have changed since then. And that is, we've had more training for the planning commissioners, as well as we have the regular, pyramid of discretion that's usually talked about ahead of public hearings. And I think always setting the tone and reminding people of what's relative to their decision making is important, and a lot of it's leading by example too. So I and you in charge, just as chair, helps set the tone. So I mean that's an upshot. Going forward, I know we do have ideas that we table, and I would say that maybe part of that is there's a more, not necessarily public, but at least public amidst the commissioners, repository for those ideas, because I don't know where they're stored, or you might have an idea that isn't necessarily a rule, but maybe it's a discussion or work plan session just to flesh out people's opinions on things. So maybe there's just an internal way or an external way, or a combined, of just kind of storing some of these talks. That's what I got.
I have a-
Carrie, Carrie?
Yeah, I have a thought on that. It goes back to my time in Minnetonka, and this is more with variance requests. And we haven't had any specific patterns with the exception of approving variances into existing non-conforming setbacks where we changed the rule and allowed a certain percentage, the 200 square feet. I don't know if maybe we don't have too many commissioners on that recall that change. But anyway, let me go back to Minnetonka. We were granting a lot of variances for 2-car garages because they determined it was reasonable to have a 2-car garage. And a reasonable 2-car garage was 24 by 24. And so because we were granting so many variances, we put that into policy that in general, the Planning Commission is going to approve variances like that. So if we maybe keep track of certain patterns, if there's conditions we're putting on variances, we note those, and it could become a policy that if X happens, this is the typical condition. But we could think about something like that, keeping a running list of conditions that we're putting on projects, see if there's some consistencies there or repeat items.
And sometimes it's not even a pattern. Sometimes it's just something sparks a commissioner and they have a good idea, either based on spur of the moment or stuff. I know that many of the commissioners on the call tonight really study this stuff, either outside of the commission work, either as part of their professional obligations, as part of their personal growth, like other committees they serve on outside of their job, or just because of strong personal interest. And also, I think there's some people that are studying this, that are on this call tonight, to study it just simply because they're really motivated to do a good job. And they're good ideas, and they might not fit into any pattern, but I'd like to capture them, at least for discussion and consideration. And maybe that's just you and me, Carrie, working harder to capture them. Pushing the ideas. I'll come to you 15 seconds, Kate. Pushing them back out to the commission and figuring out a way to collect them. Kate, please.
I'm wondering too, and maybe this is a broader Edina thought process here, but it would be great to find a way to also then engage the community to understand what's really important for them, for the Planning Commission to address. And I work in technology, so my mind goes here, but they're popular, like Product Hunt is an example where you have a list of either features or products and the community members can upvote of like, what are the things that are most important? And so that might be a way for us to, I know we have a ton of ideas and I know we have a limited amount of time, but how are we seeking feedback from the community of what should be rising to the top of our working plans or our priorities?
And we're not going to solve it tonight, but City Manager Neal, Community Development Director Teague. I mean, if you have thoughts tonight, it's wonderful. I agree, by the way, with Commissioner Agnew that I would really like, if there's actually one thing that I really would like, is to have a much more robust community dialogue process. I think would benefit all of us in innumerable ways. But we can't solve that one tonight. But if you have thoughts about how to, but I will bring it up again. I'm sure Commissioner Agnew is going to bring it up again too, and others. But how we capture these patterns or these good ideas and bring them into rulemaking, short of putting them on a work plan, because just evidence is showing that there might not be room on the work plan for some of these until like 5-6 years from now, and I think that'd be a shame. So I'm done.
Anything? I think the thing that I would add to that probably complicates what Kate just said is that from a governmental kind of a hierarchical perspective, the planning commissioners do not have constituents, and you shouldn't act like it, right? The city council has constituents in a very formal way, And I don't have constituents either, and I shouldn't act like it in the community. Nobody's elected me to do anything. But both of our roles from the community standpoint of community members like planning commission members or city staff members like Carrie and me, we're both sort of pushing up and supporting council, and we depend on council members to determine what the mood or the will of their constituents in the community is. That's where we see that community legitimacy comes from in our business anyway. But we could have a much more, that's a discussion we've got to do in person. We got to do in person sometime. 2021.
I think the idea of community engagement, for whether it's for expertise or input or sharing ideas to gain acceptance or for constituency purposes, which I agree with, actually, I think that is a key point. I think I appreciate you bringing that up, City Manager Neal, because that has caused stress on the Planning Commission in the past, where where commissioners have taken community popularity of an idea or dispopularity into account, and our job is to be more the experts and have the elected representatives weigh popularity. We're supposed to be more ivory tower-ish. So, but I think there is a place in the ivory tower for collecting data and sharing information. So
absolutely agree.
Anything else?
All right,
Commissioner Miranda.
Yes, I just like to agree with Scott and Neil that I joined this commission, to help, provide information for the city council based on information that I've done from research that I've done. And, I'm not an expert in land use per se, but I've done a lot of research and it would kill me to have us go to populism to have, input as to what we should be working on. I just think that's the wrong way to go about it. I mean, the city gets plenty of input. I think, as Ian said, we should be an ivory tower. We should be here to think about what's going on, because the city oftentimes makes final decisions on things. So I just want to put that out there, that I think, Chair Nemerov is correct that we do live in interesting times and things are changing dramatically. But we're here because, we think about these things, and most people in the city just don't think about it the way that we do. And like you also said, that, we have very involved commissioners. And so it's not like anyone here is being lazy and not kind of doing their job or whatever. So we have great discussions and great input, and we hear from, residents at every meeting. So I think that's kind of the input we need. I don't think we need to have a vote on everything that we do. Thanks.
Miranda. Anyone else? Anything further? Community Development Director Teague, City Manager Neal, do you have any final words?
No.
Thanks for having me tonight. It's very nice to see you all and talk to you about these important issues.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You bet. Take care.
Well, thank you everyone for that good discussion. Next on our agenda is our public hearing, and that's a sign variance at 3917 West 50th Street. I believe Assistant City Planner Emily Boddicker will present for the city. Good evening, Emily. Emily, are you on mute? There you are.
Thank you. Here we go. I'm going to reshare my screen here.
Emily, did you get my email?
Yes, John, I did. Thank you. So I'll have that pulled up.
Yeah, I think there were 3 of them, but sorry about that.
That's okay. All right. Tonight, the applicants, Pastor Properties and Dr. Richard Anderson, are requesting sign variances to place 2 15-square-foot signs on a wall of a building that is not tenant walls in which the signs are for. 3917 50th Street West has 2 tenant spaces on the south side of the building that are accessed from a private walkway on the east side of the building. The proposed signage would be for these 2 tenant spaces. The applicant is proposing using the walkway as wall area to calculate allowable signage and shows 2 13.8 square foot signs. Wall signs in the PCD2 zoning district are allowed to be up to 15% of the wall area. For multi-tenant buildings, staff uses tenant walls that the signs are located on to calculate the allowed square footage. Therefore, the code is interpreted that signs be placed on a tenant wall in which the sign is advertising. Buildings in the PCD2 district are also allowed freestanding signs. There are not many freestanding signs in the 50th and France area because of the required setback and the 0 lot line. The subject property has existing non-conforming freestanding sign that's allowed to remain and to be refaced. Staff questions if the proposal is reasonable. Allowed signage placed on a tenant walls identify different tenant spaces. Tenant signage is not allowed on a space where the use is not located. One extreme example of this would be allowing an outside wall sign at Southdale for an interior tenant. Should the proposed signage be allowed, it could set precedent for similar signage advertised tenant space outside of tenant walls where uses exist. There is a space on a nearby freestanding sign that would direct customers to the business. Access to tenant space off of a private or public walkway in the 50th and France area is not unique to this property or these 2 tenant spaces. 50th and France is a walkable commercial area and not all tenant spaces have frontage on a street. Allowing signs that are oriented towards 50th Street West would alter the essential character of the 50th and France district. 50th and France area is pedestrian oriented and many businesses, whether they be commercial or office space, are accessed off of different public or private walkways. Based on that information, tonight staff's recommendation is to deny the requested sign variances at 3917 50th Street West based on the findings that are outlined in the staff report. And with that, I can answer any questions. The applicant is also on and he will present, or both John Kohler from Pastor Properties and Dr. Anderson are on the call tonight and will be going through some of their own presentation as well.
Thank you, Assistant City Planner Boddicker. Does any commissioners have questions for the city?
I have a question for.
All right, Jerry.
Yes, Emily. A full answer may be coming later, but there was, I think, in part of the applicant's submittal was about some other signs that exist that weren't in violation. Could it be where these signs placed that were before there was an ordinance? Is that one explanation?
It could be. Carrie, do you know offhand when the last sign ordinance amendment would have been?
That could be the case. We haven't, it's been a while since the sign ordinance has been updated in regard to wall signage. We've done a few amendments, but nothing, at least in the last 15 years, in regard to this specific requirement.
I guess my point would be is that obviously there's usually always examples that sort of aren't in compliance which I'm not sure that's a reason, to approve, something that's not in compliance. But okay, thank you.
Commissioners. So,
I do.
Oh, okay. Hey, come on in, Lou.
Sorry.
No.
You use the example of a mall as being equivalent to this in terms of, if we allow this, then we're going to allow it at a mall. But is a mall different in that, users kind of expect a huge variety of stores in a mall, and you go to the mall as sort of a place, as opposed to a small, the sort of little Main Street-y sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Was any thought given to that?
The sign code doesn't differentiate between all the planned commercial districts 1, 2, and 3 all have the same regulations as far as the sign code goes, as far as like percentages allowed and things. So it doesn't specify specifically between districts.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners with questions? I had a couple of questions, and this, maybe everyone else figure this out. I actually have 3 questions, I think. Where precisely is the office located? Does it have an entrance? Say, you know, does it have an entrance on that walkway between the ramp and 50th Street?
So the entrances, and the applicant can get into more specifics, but on the screen here, you can see on the far right of your screen is Dr. Anderson's space. And then there's an adjacent space, and the 2 signs that the applicant is proposing are for these 2 tenant spaces. So I believe they have access here to the east off of this private walkway.
That's correct, Emily.
Just to help, okay, so, and that private walkway, is that the walkway between the ramp and 50th?
Correct.
It's between the subject properties, the subject building, and the theater.
Yes, if you were to walk on it, though, you would be going from the south parking ramp to 50th.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And okay, and then the dentist's office has a door opening to that walkway, and so you want the signs going where now, on the walkway and on the facing the ramp?
If you look at that image on the far left, you can see where the proposed sign location is at the end of the walkway.
Wait, no, we're on a different image now.
Oh, I think this is showing the proposed signage. So you're looking at the elevation on 50th Street of the 3917 building, and the 2 signs that the applicant is proposing are these 2 yellow signs.
So one's on 50th and one's on the walkway?
Both of them are facing 50th.
Both are facing 50th. Okay, thanks.
That's on the top. They're attached to the walkway.
Yeah.
Okay. I may have forgotten one of my questions already. Oh, okay. Second of my 3 questions. In the applicant submittal, this is a question for the city. The applicant talks about precedents for B Sharp and Edina endodontics. Do each of B Sharp and Edina endodontics have 2 signs, or how are they sharing signs? How does this differ?
I believe the applicant has a picture that he had emailed to me, so you'll be able to see pictures. I'm not sure when those signs were installed, but it looks like, based on how all the signage looks, is that there was at one point for the building a sign plan for some of those tenants, and they all went in at the same time. And I'm not sure what the year exactly or what the sign code was when those signs were installed, but it looks like they were planned all at the same time, so each tenant would have the same amount of signage space.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit. And then a 3rd question, slightly off topic though, but on the walkway, the 50th and France small area plan calls for improving the activity level, the vibrance of the walkway. And I'm just wondering, this makes me ping. I mean, maybe I don't want to lose this. If there's something we can do, for example, instead of the sign along the walkway, if there's something we can do to make that area more lively. The 50th and France small area plan contemplated public art, trees, greenery, that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering if that's the sort of thing the city could get on, particularly if a sign is, if the sign variance is not approved tonight. I don't know, Emily, I'm just bringing this on you. Is that something you could think about, or maybe Carrie?
In terms of requiring art, or what is the What is your thought?
Well, the city would provide some kind of public art to improve that area along the walkway.
I think that would probably
and you might
be looked at
want to
outside of the sign variance
you might want to
request.
look at the 50th and France small area plan for more guidance.
We can make that suggestion to staff that Bill Neuendorf is the staff liaison to the business community down there. We could make that suggestion to him for discussion with the property owners.
Okay. All right.
It probably doesn't change the request, the desire of the applicant here to get his signs.
Correct. But it's something, particularly if the sign variance is denied, it's something that could improve the atmosphere around the office. And it's something the city that we've said that we would like to do too. So that's everything I had. Do any other commissioners have any follow-on questions for the city? With that, then, I believe Mr. John Kohler is speaking for the applicant. Mr. Kohler, are you?
Hey, Ian, this is Commissioner Bennett. I had a quick question.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Just regarding, I guess for me, a lot of these changes, I kind of dwell on the principle of not setting a precedent, and usually these things are put in place for a good reason, and that is something I would be concerned about. In this case, just out of curiosity, in the 50th and France area, with, since this is a district, has something like this been requested or put before the Planning Commission in the last 10, 20 years? Does this come up often to staff? Just curious.
In the last, I guess not necessarily specific to the 50th and France area, it does come up regularly, I'll say, with questions about where signage can be located, as far as putting it on tenant walls and not just, especially like at Southdale Mall or other multi-tenant buildings. We'll get questions on where they can put signs or where it's allowed based on the sign code.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and then maybe you could also speak to, this being a business district, unlike some of our other small areas where there are other things in place, like there's a lot of 50th and France signage around to identify it as a place. And I know that was part of staff's concern, but if you could just kind of elaborate on that, and maybe there's other stipulations about the business district that influences that we're not as aware of.
Yeah. So one thing that the staff report pointed out was that this building is unique in the fact that it has an existing freestanding sign, and not all businesses or buildings at 50th and France have a freestanding sign due to the fact that there's certain setback requirements. So the existing sign for this building or freestanding sign is located here, close to the corner of the building. So staff has talked with the applicant about potentially utilizing that freestanding sign to help with wayfinding, so they can get pedestrians to certain office spaces or tenant spaces that aren't necessarily on 50th.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've noticed that walking by the area too, just to check it out ahead of time. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Do any other commissioners have any questions right now? Well, Mr. Kohler, speaking for the applicant, welcome. Mr. Anderson, Dr. Anderson, you can speak too, of course, if you wish, but welcome.
Well, thank you. As stated, I'm John Kohler. I'm an architect with Pastor Properties, and I'm here with Dr. Anderson tonight to present this sign variance application to you. As noted in our application, the Edina sign code does not define where a sign is to be located on the exterior of a building. It merely sets limitations on the allowable area of the sign as it relates to the building wall in which the sign is placed. When we initially met with Emily on this. We discussed it, and we were told that the staff interpretation of this section of the code is that signs must be located on the actual wall of the space the tenant occupies. And then we were also told that signage cannot be located over a walkway leading to a tenant space, even if that part of that walkway is part of the actual building construction and not just simply a canopy or something sticking out like that. In preparing for tonight, we looked at other Edina buildings, and as noted in the application and discussed earlier, the building directly next door is a perfect example of what we're requesting. And Emily, can you pull up the picture? I think it's under the next door one. There you go. This is the 50th and France building from the Lund's parking lot. And if you look just to the right of the Breadsmith sign, you'll see the Edina Endodontics sign. That tenant space is not behind that sign. That tenant space is way on the interior of that building. And Emily, can you go to the other picture that was part of that one? Yep, that one. Perfect. So you can actually see our building on the left side of this picture, and you can see the B-sharp hair sign, and that sign as well is not on the wall of the B-sharp space. The B-sharp space is, again, way inside this building. And if you look at the right corner of this picture, you will actually see a directory for this building, which obviously, you know, these tenants are requesting or have the same signage we're requesting. It's not just simply for pedestrians, it's for people driving by to be able to get an idea of where they're going and where, you know, where they can go. And so now seeing this, they know they need to park in the south parking ramp. We also looked at other buildings in Edina. We went to Galleria. So if you can, either one of the Galleria images, the top one or the second one. On this sign, if you see all the signage to the right on the building, none of those signs are located on the tenant space that they're, you know, meant for. And if you go to the other, you can notice the Good Earth sign. That sign is above their tenant space. But if you go to the other sign, there's another Good Earth sign on the right side of. You can go back to that one you were just on the right
Sorry.
side. Other is it just keeps jumping back. Can you go to that other, the number 3? Yep, there you go. The Good Earth sign on this one clearly isn't on the Good Earth space. In fact, this is a second sign for Good Earth, as none of those other signs are on the tenant space that they are meant for. And then if you go to the Jerry's sign, should be further down or maybe up. There you go. The top one. We also went to Jerry's, obviously an Edina institution. Here you have all of those signs with the exception of the Jerry's hardware are not located on the tenant space they serve. In fact, they're on the top of the walkway that serves those tenant spaces. So this is exactly what we're requesting in this. And, you know, obviously it isn't detrimental or hasn't you know, hurt the image or anything in this area. They're simply there so that people going by can see where they're trying to go. And then finally, if you can go to the Southdale image, number 4. Here on Southdale, in fact, is a sign over a walkway for a space in the building that is not on that tenant space, and it's Southdale. Albeit I understand it's the Hennepin County Service Center, but that sign was put there so people know what door to go into to go to the service center. I mean, you can't simply say Southdale. You know, you'd have people wandering all over trying to get to the service center. So we're not saying any of these should be taken down or anything like that. We're using these as excellent examples of why it's important for us to have these 2 small signs. Can you just switch to the elevation sheet, Emily? I think that was the last one.
This one?
It's the, yep, that's it. So this is the elevation of our building. This one, unlike the other one that was in there, shows the existing altar sign that is currently there. That sign is about 60 square feet, although they'd be allowed to have 84 square feet. The two signs we're talking about are over on the left side, the two rectangles. They meet the sign area for just the simple building area of that walkway overhang. To give you an idea of the size of those signs, everybody's familiar with a 2x4 ceiling tile in an office. Those signs are about the size of 1.5 ceiling tiles. So that's all the bigger they are. They're quite small, but they're enough for people going by to be able to see that this is where you go to get to Dr. Anderson. I would guess I could probably ask anyone that didn't just walk over there and specifically look at that little freestanding sign what it says. Certainly no one going by in a vehicle can see it or read it. And it's something that if it wasn't in some of the leases, we'd get rid of it because it really doesn't serve much purpose out there. It doesn't function very well. With that, I guess, I think these signs match numerous other signs throughout the city for the very same reason. And at this time, I guess I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Anderson so he can give you actually some more personal information on what he's dealt with the location of his space.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for your comments, and I think that describes the situation quite nicely. Thank you for your time tonight so we can present this. I'd like to give you a little bit more of personal experience that we've had in this location. I was previously across the street for 32 years, and so I have been in the area for a long time, and people know that I'm there. And one of the issues has been people finding a new location. But first, let me tell you about the first experience that we had shortly after we moved into the new location. We had purchased a refrigerator from Warner Stellian to have in the break room, and we arranged for delivery. I told the delivery people to pull into the alcove in front of the Edina Theater, and then our office is located on the walkway adjacent to the Edina Theater. At the appointed time, they didn't show up. So I called Warner Stellian and I said, your people didn't show up. And they said, yeah, they were there, but you weren't there. And I said, what do you mean I wasn't there? And they said, well, they couldn't find your office. And so I said, well, send it back again and I'll meet them. I'll meet you in front of the Edina Theater. It took a week to arrange that, but I did meet them. And as I was taking them down the walkway, the delivery people said, well, we couldn't see where you were because we were looking for your sign and we couldn't see you. So we figured you had the wrong address, so we left. That's been the case with FedEx, with UPS. The mailman even had a hard time at first knowing where we were. He does now. Metro Mobility has had trouble dropping people off and having them find our office. Vans for Metro Mobility are too large to go in the South Ramp, so they have to use the 50th Street delivery method. My address is 50th Street, so people assume I'm addressable from 50th Street, that I can go to that area and they'd see me or find me. Some people have come to the old office location, and then they realize I'm not there. We have sent out a lot of information saying we'll move just across the street. But people will then walk out to 50th and look across the street and don't see a sign and they're not sure where to go. This is not an unusual problem. We have had hundreds and hundreds of people that have wandered around looking for us. And my office manager has spent a fair number of hours answering phone calls. The first thing I hear is, well, where are you? Can you see the Edina Theater? We had one lady who wandered around the rain one day, came in the office totally drenched and was angry about the whole thing. And she said, why in the world don't you have a sign out on 50th Street? That's your address. And I said, well, Emily Boddicker doesn't allow us to have a sign. And she said, that's absolutely ridiculous. I've heard that comment many, many times. the maintenance person at 50th and France has said, why don't you have a sign on 50th and telling people where you are? 50th Street is our address, so that is the area that people would go to try and find us. The small sign that's on the sidewalk, like John said, is totally unreadable from the street. It's even easy to miss if you're walking down the sidewalk. So we need direction to show that we're down that walkway space. But I guess I'd like to share one personal note because I'd like to tell the story of Bill Wiedenbacher. And I can use his name because he asked that I tell you the story. Bill's 87 years old. He's in a wheelchair bound, and he lives in Martin Luther Manor. He came to our office for an appointment. His wife had been in earlier, so she knew where we were. So when they arranged transportation and through Premier Transportation and dropped him off in front of the Edina Theater, she directed people down the walkway to our office. He was there for several hours. It was November 11th. It had turned very cold, and Bill was a fairly frail man. When it came time to leave, it had become dark outside, which happens in November in Minnesota. And we called Premier Transportation to come and get him. They showed up at the address, apparently, but left because they couldn't see our sign. They couldn't see where we were. They confused as to where our office was. We waited for 2 hours. Bill waited for over 2 hours to get picked up by Premier Transportation. We kept telling them, come to the Edina Theater, and they simply could not find the location going down the street that night, and there was no signage to show that. A simple sign would have solved that problem. We finally took Bill over to Lund's and called Premier and said, you know where Lund's is? They said yes, so they came and got him. It was 4 hours before he was home after he left my office. This could have been easily solved with a simple sign showing that our office is down that walkway. You, the Planning Commission, have the ability to authorize this request, and I would request your help in this regard to help patrons find where we are and to be able to simply locate our office space. So thank you for your time. We appreciate the ability to present the situation.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anderson and Mr. Kohler. So now is the opportunity for members of the Planning Commission to ask questions of the applicant. Do any commissioners have any questions? Hey, just jump in if you do. I can't see anyone's screen.
So this is Commissioner Miranda. So these two signs seem reasonable, but I guess the question becomes, you know, how many other clients do you have or will you have, and what if that space gets subdivided and whatnot? So I guess the concern would be, you know, where does this lead? So I guess I see the staff position somewhat here. Could you tell us what your thoughts are on like where this would go if you get more tenants or subdivide or something?
Absolutely. Councilmember Miranda, that's exactly why we've requested these two signs, because there are just 2 tenant spaces. So that is the limit to what we'd have. That's why we requested it this way, with that very thought in mind.
Okay, thanks. But okay, thank you.
Any other commissioner? Just identify yourself and ask your question if you have one.
This is Commissioner Bennett. I know we're seeing what has been most recently proposed for your signage solutions. Did you have alternative ideas too that maybe were more permissible in your eyes or less permissible, I guess, or is this just what we got?
Well, I think in looking at this and looking at the code, you know, your code does not state that a sign must be located on a tenant space wall. I mean, we aren't really asking for anything that isn't allowed in the code. This is this is a staff interpretation of the code. It is not written in the code. In fact, initially we wondered why we were even asking or being requested to ask for a variance. This is not in the code. What we are asking for or requesting by the letter of your code is perfectly allowable.
I guess I'm not sure if that answered my question, but I understand your point.
Well, I mean, we tried to minimize, we knew we were basing it on the allowable sign area for that small portion of the building. So that's what we came up with. I mean, we might be able to do it with 2 small stacked signs where that horizontal sign is. We were just trying to keep them, they're only 13 point something square feet. So we were just trying to fit them aesthetically into that area. We actually had come up with kind of an overall layout for signage that works very similar to the altar sign. That's why that sign is 24 square feet smaller than what's allowed by code, because it fits properly within that section of the building. So in fact, that sign is way smaller than is allowed. And so these signs, although they meet just what's allowed for that area, we felt the rectangular shapes and all picked up on what Altar's done and what we'd like to see other sign people do on the front of this building. So it looks much more uniform and not all broken up.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other commissioners?
This is
Commissioner Olson.
Joanne, and apologize that my video's off. Whenever I turn it on, my internet slows down. So my question, I'm just looking at your graphics and the one sign, the kind of the freestanding wall sign, if that's what you want to call it. Could you utilize the existing sign that's on a sidewalk, the existing freestanding sign? Can you add the tenants and Dr. Anderson's signage there and the future tenant too, like with a sign kind of or an arrow pointing to go? I'm fine with the wall sign that you're showing because like you showed those examples, they're all over the city and I can support that, but I'm kind of struggling having the one that's kind of extended out.
We could relocate that sign so the 2 signs were above and below each other where the horizontal sign is. Dr. Anderson is currently on that directory sign and no one can find it.
Okay. Oh.
I'd also add that sign is not illuminated, so at night you can't read it.
Yeah, and it actually, half of the sign faces the cosmetics store that's adjacent to us because that building is further out in front. So it's blocked from one direction. But those 2 signs could be, you know, one above the other over that walkway. This was just as an example of what the 2 areas would look like.
Okay. Well, that might be easier to, because that might be more similar to what we see throughout the city.
That can be done.
Than the one that's, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not, that's called a blade sign.
Okay, thanks.
Any other commissioners with questions? I might have some questions for city staff, but we can wait. So if there are no further questions for the applicant, I guess this is the time of the meeting or the time of the public hearing, excuse me, when I say this is a public hearing. And that means that members of the public have the opportunity and the right to call in and give testimony about this matter for up to 3 minutes. If there are any people watching tonight's meeting and they wish to call in, they should call 1-800-374 0221. Enter conference ID 1042195. Press *1 to be placed into queue. City staff will let you know when you're on. You'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak. City staff will let you know when you're approaching and hitting the end of your time. We ask if you do call in that if you have something to give, that you try not to share. You try to bring something new. Don't just repeat something another caller may have said. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Scott Dan, and let them take it away and let us know if you have any callers.
Thank you, Chair Nemerov. We do have one caller, one resident in the queue to ask a question or to give testimony, I should say. And if the operator can please unmute the line of Lori Groats. Ms. Groats, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place. When I read the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting and I saw what the public hearing was, I also was wondering why the tenant needed to apply for a variance. There were so many other situations within town where the signs appeared on a building that were not right over the space. And so I certainly support this for the building owner and the tenant. I know neither one of them, but I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that they should be entitled to advertise their space so their customers can find them, especially right now during this time with COVID. It's not an unreasonable request. Plus, I didn't see why they had to apply for a variance. Apply for a variance, it costs you money, costs you time, costs you effort. And so I would say let them have the sign. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Riesig, do we have anyone else, any other people wishing to give testimony?
At this moment, no, we do not. I would guess with the delay, we should wait a minute or so. I have 8:25 as my clock, so if we're all comfortable waiting until about 8:26, I can let you know, and we can move forward if there are no other callers.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got 8:26, and we have no additional callers, so I think you can feel free to move forward.
Thank you. So to close, we'll then close the public hearing portion and return to a discussion with the Planning Commission. To do that, we need a motion and a second.
I move approval. I move approval.
Second.
To close the public hearing.
Ms. Olson, can you do a roll vote, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Recuse myself.
my apologies, thank you. Chair Nemerov.
That's to close the public hearing. So that leads us to discussion. I'd like to, before we do that, I'd like to go back to staff, though. There's been a few comments made by our resident and by the applicant that challenged the idea that a variance is needed. Wondering if you could walk through the ordinance and explain why you think a variance would be needed for these signs.
Sure. Let me pull it up. So as far as the interpretation goes, if there was one tenant in this building, the sign code would allow 15% of this wall to be used as signage. So this one tenant would be allowed to use all 15% of that. With multi-tenant buildings, all signs don't come at the same time, and there's no way to divide up what percentage goes to what tenant other than using the tenant wall. And so that's how the staff has been interpreting the sign code. With some of the examples, there may, like with the Galleria, there's a sign code or a sign plan that they use. They divide up each tenant space evenly to add up to their maximum allowable signage. With the Hennepin County sign, that's a governmental sign, so technically there's other rules or other regulations that they do or do not have to meet. So that's basically, you know, as far as interpretation goes, tenant spaces change often, and so there's no way to use, you know, without a sign plan or anything, there's no way to evenly divide up allowable signage other than using the tenant wall.
So are there two tenants here right now?
There are.
I think Mr. Kohler can speak specifically because they just recently redid the tenant spaces in this building, I believe, on the first floor. And so the Alter Fitness sign uses, or they had up to 15% of their tenant wall to use as signage for their tenant space. And so that was what Mr. Kohler was referring to as, you know, they had up to, you know, they had an additional 20 square feet or so that they would be allowed to use. And that was calculating with the maximum allowed square footage for their tenant space. I think Mr. Kohler can speak specifically to how many tenants face 50th on this first floor.
Right now, the Alter is the only tenant on the first floor. The remaining space, we anticipate the space facing 50th to be divided into two spaces. And then Dr. Anderson and the other space are the final spaces on the first floor, and those are to the back. So the signage, you would have two other signs on that first floor facade. And that doesn't include any signage for the second floor tenants. Which I guess, Emily, could we put second floor tenants up on the top?
Yes.
I don't know that we'd want to do that, but.
Okay, well, that's all I have now. But other commissioners, do you have any questions?
Yes, this is Commissioner Agnew. So for the other examples that were provided to us by the applicant, Emily, I did see that I heard you reference obviously the Galleria and the example that was given at Southdale. But for the other examples for this, for the same area, right, for the 50th and France node, were variances needed for, I forget if it was an orthodontist or someone else with next to that Brett Smith example, was a variance needed in that situation?
I believe there was a sign plan that was approved, or the signage was done all at the same time for those tenants. I would have to go back and look. I wasn't involved in that. It was done prior to when I started. So I would have to go back and look.
Thank you.
Not to my knowledge, there wasn't a sign variance, but again, I'd have to check.
And so it's more for this situation, a difference in timing, how this wasn't a part of a sign plan when there was other construction or original construction. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Just if I can add some clarity there, since the Lunds built this building, there have only been 2 tenants on the entire, or 3 actually. Oh, they've been there for many, many years.
Any other commissioners with questions? Emily, you may be able to take down the image to the.
This is Commissioner Bennett. Quick question. I'm just putting myself in the perspective of a resident who might be tuning in and not so clear on some of this. Can you describe when a sign plan happens or can happen? Is it just, from what Commissioner Agnew mentioned, just during initial construction and tenant leasing, or can it happen at other times? And what does that process look like? Thank you.
So the sign plans that I've been involved in are done with development or redevelopment of parcels. Carrie might be able to speak to some that were done prior to that, or like the Galleria, if that was done. I'm not sure at what point in time with the Galleria that was approved, or if it was something that was worked out at a certain point in time. But the ones that I've been involved in are with the redevelopment of parcels.
Yes, so there's an old book of sign plans that essentially became ordinances. They were done many years ago. I believe the Galleria is one of them. The way we do them today with the new developments with PUDs, if they're asking for something that's different from the zoning ordinance, we would write the sign ordinance basically right into the PUD. So that's the tool that we've been using over the last 10 years or so. I think the difference here is this is 2 new tenants. Those existing other tenant signs on the building may have been part of an overall sign plan that was approved for this building years ago. We'd have to follow up on that, but we've got 2 new tenant spaces here.
I guess I have a quick follow-up to that regarding, 50th and France as an area, like I alluded to, being a business district. I mean, is there thought, and I know this is stepping outside of this, but I think it helps provide perspective to people either deciding tonight or people curious. Is there ever been a consideration, of more uniform signage in the 50th and France area for wayfinding as well as just consistency with visual appeal, or is that limited to only kind of the public right away?
Yeah, I think it's just been limited to the public signs where they did kind of a unifying of some of that signage for the parking, but not working with the association all that often. I'm not sure how much it's come up. We haven't seen many, I can't think of other variances that we've considered in this district over the last 10, 15 years.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Perhaps, Emily, this is, I think, the existing sign, the freestanding one, I guess it's not illuminated, but I mean, it's out in sort of in the walkway, correct? And
Yes.
who is responsible for the look, the maintenance, the information on that particular sign? Or it would be in public right away, so does the city take responsibility for that, or is there an agreement, or how is that managed?
The sign is actually located on the subject property, and so the building owners would have responsibility for maintenance, or they would be able to reface it.
So its actual location is down the private drive or private walkway. Is that what?
It's on, yes, it's on the subject property, so within the property lines of the subject property, located, it would be the northeast corner of the building, I believe. Is that right, John?
Correct.
Okay. So any changes, improvements, use of that would be under the power of the property owner, correct?
Yes, they would be allowed to, apply for a sign permit to reface that sign.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Strauss. Any other commissioners with any questions, further questions? Any discussion, any comments? I personally, Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I just had one last question for the applicant, and that was regarding So Commissioner Strauss, part of your question is, if you're walking down the sidewalk along 50th France, it's not in your way when you're walking, but it appears to be like in the sidewalk area, just closer to the building. So it's not like down the walkway hidden, but it's not visible to a car perhaps driving by as much as it is intended for what appears to be pedestrian walking by. But I guess to that point, if there is an ability to reface that sign, I mean, if you are walking by, I could see why you're confused as well. From a wayfinding perspective, it doesn't necessarily have an arrow saying down the alley or, et cetera. So do you have plans to improve that sign, illuminate it, like the one of the applicants suggested, and anything to that degree?
We'd certainly, illuminating it would be nice. We don't think it serves a real great purpose out there. We almost would rather put a smaller building directory just on the face of one of the columns there so people know. I mean, it's really, right now, Dr. Anderson's on it, but it's primarily for the tenants on the second floor. Right now, we don't have big, you'd have a huge Fresenius sign on the top of that building for their offices up there because they're 3/4 of the second floor. Or Dr. Bartman, he'd have a big sign up on the second floor. I mean, it really was just, it's meant to just serve them, and you don't really read it. I mean, if you asked most people in Edina who the tenants were on that sign, they'd have no clue. And it's really, what we're requesting is something more for a passerby in a car to find it. One of the other confusing things is this building has two addresses. There's 3917 and 3925. The address in stone on the front of the building is 3925. So it's fairly confusing out there.
Okay. Commissioner Bent, do you have further questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess, or you'd confuse it with when that pillar was inscribed with the year. I mean, is there an option to have the address on that side of the building to help with that? I guess that's another question.
I don't know. I mean, the 3925 was inscribed in the building when the cornerstone was laid. So, I can't. You could certainly put address numbers up there. I'm not sure it wouldn't be more confusing.
No, I know. I know there's 3925 also not etched in place, but elsewhere on the building itself. But just a question. And
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Commissioner Miranda.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused now about sign plans. So could the applicant or the building owner have a sign plan that would incorporate these two signs and apply to the city? And has that been done?
Boy, I think at this point, we would recommend if you're apt to approve it, we just approve the variance this evening.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the root cause here.
Well, I think if a building at this point in time would have, this could be considered a sign plan, if the building owner came forward with signage for their entire building that didn't necessarily conform to the way that the city code is interpreted, they could come forward with a variance and get some sort of plan approved.
I mean, I guess I'm speaking out of turn, but if that's the course that you would like us to go, where we would basically submit an elevation like that, we could certainly do that. I think when we met with staff, I think the thought was the way to go at that time was to submit for a variance.
Well, I think this could be considered, what you have submitted could be taken or interpreted as a sign plan for the building. It still needs to be reviewed by the Planning Commission for a variance because it wouldn't comply with the sign code.
Okay.
Further questions by commissioners? So I'm still a little confused. So I'm trying to pull up the sign ordinance, and it's loading slowly. So as my understanding, there's three parts that I want to confirm. One is that each tenant is entitled to one sign equal to 15% of the tenant wall. Is that? Wait, back up. Each tenant is entitled to a sign equal to 15% of the tenant wall. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the way that staff has been interpreting.
Okay, it's loading so slowly. And second, that's only one sign though. They can't divide the 15%, 7.5, 7.5 into two signs. Is that correct?
They can draw one box around the sign. So whatever signage that they have.
And that could the box could include two tenant names.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be for two tenants if it's on one single tenant wall, I think. But I'm kind of confused with the question. But they could draw one box around all the signage as long as it conforms to that 15%.
So what I'm looking though is it looks like what we have here is a property with two tenants. Is that correct? There are two tenant spaces. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And
for what? What the request is for, Ian? Is that what the question is?
Is this? I'll ask very discrete questions. Is this property? Does this property include two discrete tenants?
There are two tenants that do
two tenant spaces
on 50th. There are 3 tenant spaces on the first floor that face 50th. So ultimately, you would have the two tenants that face 50th would want their allowable signage above their 2 spaces. Right now, the only tenant there is Alter. So that's why I showed the sign, the plan with Alter.
So there are 3 tenant spaces?
There are 5 tenant spaces on the first floor.
5 tenant spaces. So theoretically,
3 that are accessed off of 50th and 2 that are accessed off of the private walkway.
okay, you keep adding facts. I'll get to these facts, but I just want to lay out I want to kind of like break each. I want to take the wheel apart into each component piece. There are 5 tenant spaces, right?
That's the plan. That's the way we see this building laid out.
Okay, and then so each, according to Edina code, does the Edina code allow each tenant to have a sign equal to 15% of its tenant, whatever its tenant wall is? Forget where it faces, but just 15% of its tenant wall. And it's one sign though. It can't be 2 signs of 7.5% and 7.5%. Is that correct?
They could draw one box. That box would have to encompass the 15%.
So but the one box is one sign, right?
The one box could encompass 2 signs, like a logo and some wording. But that box that you would draw around the signage on the wall would need to conform to the 15%.
Okay. And where in the Edina code does it say that the sign has to be connected to where the tenant is physically located?
That's how it's been interpreted by staff in multi-tenant buildings, because multi-tenant signs come in at separate times. So if you don't look at it per tenant wall or per tenant, you would look at each tenant would be allowed 15% of the entire wall area.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not, I mean, what we're...
Hold on, Mr. Kohler, please. But the code itself doesn't say that. That's an interpretation.
The tenant wall?
That the sign has to be, on the wall where the tenant is located.
Yes, that's an interpretation.
Okay. I think that's everything I have. Do any other commissioners have any further questions or comments about this matter? Wish to explain a way you're leaning or wish to engage in a further discussion to flesh it out? Commissioner Bennett, hello.
Yeah, I guess, with signage matters, I always ask myself, what would Ace of Base think? And, I don't know if they saw the sign for this one. But seriously, I think this is a very particular and reasonable ask. I mean, 50th and France is a walkable area, and because of it, we have tenants located in different areas around buildings that aren't normal to anywhere else in the city, minus Southdale, where you have a big mall and everyone's enclosed. Think of a lot of our other districts where you pretty much see the space from the street, and those people are thus entitled signage right on that space that passerbys can see. So I'm leaning in favor of this from a wayfinding perspective. There was another signage variance maybe a few years back that I also supported that was for the Edina High School. And I don't think it was ultimately supported by the commission, but for me, I kind of err on the side, not setting a precedent. But it really comes down to wayfinding. That's the point of a sign to me, not just, a brand of someone's logo. So how do we help people find where they need to go? And currently, what they're entitled to just does not serve that purpose. That freestanding sign is for pedestrians at most, not for people driving by a very busy area. So I'm leaning in favor of it. I kind of support Commissioner Olson's critique about the specific locations. It'd be nice to just have them all right on the wall instead of one protruding out, not even in the walkway, but the other walkway. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Any other commissioners?
I was going to make a motion, unless. Oh, go ahead, Jerry.
Joanne, this may come right back to you. I think I understood your suggestion as an alternative, but I would like to have you repeat it because it could be, to me, a possible option to the request.
Sure.
But normally, with staff's position, I would find it difficult to sort of find against it. The fact of it being staff interpretation suggests just that. So I would like to give Commissioner Olson just a chance to maybe to restate her option before, and I'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson, you got a nice introduction.
Thanks, Jerry. Well, again, I was just what Jimmy just said too about the protruding sign, and I think that Mr. Kohler had a suggestion for how to have both those signs on the wall. And it sounds like you were saying they'd both be facing 50th, or would there be one? They'd both be facing 50th, so then the cars could see. And if that works, that's what I would, recommend.
May I address that? That's correct. They would both be facing 50th. You'd have one sign. You can see the horizontal sign in that image above the walkway. You just have two signs, one above the other right there. So that blade sign would not be there.
And how do you think that would look? Do you think that would look kind of busy and?
That's
such a technical term.
Kind of why we did this, but I think you could make it. You could probably make it work.
Yeah,
I think the most important piece here is that Dr. Anderson gets visibility from 50th, and if that's 2 signs stacked there, that would certainly solve that.
This is Commissioner Agnew. There's another blade sign on the other side of the walkway, is there not?
I'm confused. What do you mean on the other side of the walkway?
So on the other building that's over there, I think that.
Correct. There is a sign for, it's a cosmetics business, I believe. Yes, they have a blade sign that sticks out toward our building.
So it wouldn't be abnormal.
There is a blade sign right there, just sticking off the adjacent building.
Yeah, there's quite a few projecting signs in the 50th and France area.
Could you speak to the reason why that wasn't supported by staff, the protruding signs? Wasn't it something like being above a walkway, or was there not a reason for that?
No, it was based on the fact that it wasn't in front of the tenant space. Other projecting signs that have been approved in the 50th and France area project over, some of them project over right-of-way or over other walkways. There's certain rules and regulations that they have to have a certain clearance, but staff's recommendation was based on the fact that it wasn't located on the tenant wall. For projecting signs, and not to get into more or confuse anyone even more, for projecting signs that project over right-of-way, for those businesses that have projecting signs, there are certain size regulations. Businesses that have a projecting sign lose some of the ability or some of the allowable square footage in wall signage that they're allowed. The wall signage goes from 15% to 5% if you have a projecting sign, which in this case, it doesn't project over right of way or anything. So but that's, there are other projecting signs in the 50th and France area.
Okay, well then I take back my point about that. I thought there was more of a safety and a legal reason for that. So I have no problem with that blade sign over the walkway and support this.
Yeah, me either. I'll make a motion to approve the variance as proposed by the applicant. And I don't know, Emily, if we have to have any other specific conditions. Maybe you just have to say, with the plans dated November 2nd, 2020. Yeah, I just said 2020th. I'm losing it.
Some findings could be helping with wayfinding.
Yeah, could I?
Right. Okay, that's
some
good.
Findings. We need to put some detailed findings in the resolution. So I'll just offer these, and then you can edit however you'd like. That the signs meet the variance criteria. The proposed signage is reasonable in terms of size, and scale of the building. There are other similar signs located on the building, and the uses for these signs are addressed off 50th Street.
That sounds good.
I second that.
Is there any further discussion?
I have something I'd like to share through emotion about this, not to this exact moment.
What's that, Jimmy?
I just want to say, hearing staff's report, kind of what Commissioner Strauss alluded to. City staff does an incredible job with, protecting our city, for development and things like this. And for the most part,
everyone, if you could, if everyone except for Commissioner Bennett, if you could mute your line, please.
I just say, there's been signage matters that have come up before, and I think, everything's reasonable. And there's a lot of areas in our code where you have to interpret something. And I feel like city staff does a really good job with resources available as well as their expertise. So there were some comments addressed specifically to Emily, and I think that's unfair. I just wanted to put that out on the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Beck. Commissioner Miranda?
Yeah, I just want to say, in the Southdale plan, we talk about, buildings having 4 sides and every side is a front and that sort of thing. And we may start to be seeing more and more buildings that have tenants on all different sides, whatever. But I think the intent of the sign ordinance is that no one side should have more than 15% coverage in signs. So I don't know if we need to update the ordinance or something, but I don't think we want, 30% on one side and 5% on another. So, I think we just need to balance that.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Anyone else? So I'm in favor of the variance because I think that the ordinances are unclear, and yes, there is a duty to interpret ordinances, but it's I lean often, not always, but if there isn't clarity, I often lean to what the ordinance says as opposed to what traditional interpretation is. And if that's really how we want it, if there's interpretations that we're using, and that's really basic, and that's a key reason for denying a variance, I would suggest that we codify that interpretation. But short of codifying that interpretation, I would lean to grant the variance or grant the approval. That's my feelings. So anyone else have any, if that we have a motion and a second, and so I would ask City Planning Staff Member Liz Olson to do a roll vote.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Bennett? Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Aye. So it's passed here. Does that conclude the matter? When or if would this go to City Council?
It does not go to City Council. This is final action unless the decision is appealed.
Within 10 days. Thank you very much, Assistant Planner Boddicker. Well, Mr. Kohler, Dr. Anderson, congratulations, and that concludes the public hearing regarding your sign variance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Good holiday season. So next on the Planning Commission agenda for the evening is reports and recommendations, and we actually have a couple of discrete items. We often have things that come up, but tonight we actually have discrete, exciting items. The first item is election of a new vice chair through the stub period of this current year, which I believe expires when? February 28th?
That sounds right. Yes, I believe our annual meeting is our meeting in March.
Okay, so we did lose our vice chair who had served for almost 6 years on the Planning Commission, did a lot of work, and so tonight is the opportunity for people to nominate a new vice chair, or it is also 100% acceptable to just say, I'd like to do that. So if anyone would like to nominate either someone else or themselves, now is the time.
I would like to nominate Sheila.
Okay.
Have her kind of move on up.
Moving on up. Any other nominations or self-offerings? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. So with that, with an uncontested nomination, I will suggest, if that's okay with you, Sheila, if it's okay with everyone else, that we just do a roll vote. If that doesn't put people on, if anyone has any other commentary, I'm not seeing anyone, let's do a vote, So, Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote?
Sheila, you cool with this? All right, good.
I'm okay with that.
All right,
Thanks for asking.
Wonderful question.
I checked with her first, Jimmy.
Best question of the
You'll stay
evening.
with us. Yeah.
Ms. Olson.
Just for good measure, can we have a second?
Commissioner Bennett, would you like to second?
Absolutely. I second my 44th and France co-chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
You better vote yes.
Olson?
Oh, aye.
Congratulations, Sheila.
You're going out of order. I don't know. Yeah, congratulations. So now we have to do secretary, right?
Well, now we have an opening for secretary. Carrie, what do we do about that? Do we vote now, or is that the next meeting?
I think we could do that now.
Okay. So, any nominations or of someone else or yourself?
I would nominate Kate.
Okay. And I got to ask the Bennett question. Kate, would you accept that nomination?
Yes, I would.
Is there a second of that nomination? The Ms. Olson question.
Second that.
Are there any other nominations or people who are interested in becoming secretary? Okay. Ms. Olson, you know what to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Nemerov?
Aye. Well, very good. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Kate. Congratulations to both of you. Thank you for everything you've done and will do. So thank you. Next on our agenda is our meeting schedule for next year. I don't know who is someone on staff going to present that or discuss that?
This is more of an information and to get it into your hands so you can update your calendars. That the city council at their last meeting approved the official meeting calendar for the city for 2021.
Okay, and we're the blue.
Yes.
We're the blue. And that's
This is Liz. I just want to comment that it is not officially adopted until tomorrow morning's HRA meeting, but we don't anticipate changes.
okay. And
That's
the blue is not.
Council and HRA approved these, even though they're the same body, but yes.
And Liz, when it gets approved, would you send out invitations for calendaring it?
I certainly will. If this is a good time to discuss how we'd like to do that, especially being virtual this year, I'm open to a small discussion on how you would like to receive those. If you would like WebEx invitations for the entire year, or save the dates and WebEx invitations a few weeks prior.
Any thoughts? Anyone have a preference?
I would think if you send a calendar invite to everybody, people can accept it, which does several things. One, it gives you an immediate RSVP because you'll know who's able to attend or not. And then it also puts that WebEx link on the people's calendars so that you don't have to search through your emails and try and find it at some other point. And so, and then to have one person create a calendar invite is pretty efficient because then you've got 14 people who can just accept. I mean, assuming other staff people who can just accept instead of everybody having to create their own calendar invite. So I personally would really appreciate just one person creating an invite and sending it out. It seems like that's the most efficient thing to do.
I am happy to do that. Carrie, would you like work sessions included as well, or should those be as needed?
Good question. We could just put them as placeholders if we continue our usual first meeting of every month we do the work session. We could send that out as a placeholder as well.
Okay, I will send those out shortly, just to let everyone know, since they are not a perfect reoccurring event. I will have to send separate invitations for each meeting, but I'm happy to do that, and I'll send those out following this meeting.
Thank you. I know that's a lot of work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I noticed July 20th is a holiday this year. Is that? Not sure. Okay, well, whatever. That sounds great. That sounds great. So next on our agenda is correspondence and petitions. So I just noted that we received some commentary regarding an affordable housing project. That's a correspondence. That's not before us at this time. If it comes up as a sketch plan or an application, Ms. Olson will send that back to us so we don't have to store this, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. Any other correspondence, petitions we should be thinking about? Okay. I noticed that the city council, this is somewhat relevant, they had a meeting the other night regarding road construction for two neighborhood projects, and many of us probably know that was in the news last year in the city, and they actually received a petition from all neighbors in one neighborhood not to put in a sidewalk. I think so. That was usually we see more petitions for sidewalks, but that was interesting. Next is chair and member comments. Do any members have comments? Commissioner Bennett?
Always have comments. But I just wanted to quickly share to the broad audience about the work session tonight, so people are a little more informed. We're talking about parking requirements in the city, and we had a national kind of renowned consultant kind of educate us on a lot of solutions. And I guess one of the key things was, a one size fits all for a city as complex as ours is probably not the future. And so there's a lot of custom tailored solutions for different areas depending on use and history, and as Commissioner Berube mentioned, focusing on really keeping it local, like the solution. And so I think that's just key as we think about how parking is going to change in the future, as it has already. And just from a general note, if you just think about the city of Edina, we have some very different areas in our city. Unlike a lot of other cities around Minnesota, we're not Burnsville, like out in the suburbs with a big mall, and we're not Minneapolis either, but we actually have pieces of those. We have very suburban neighborhoods. We have a big regional mall setting that we're hoping to kind of transition to the future. Then we also have these little neighborhood nodes that were built off of mass transit in the past. So it's important to think of parking as as different in those areas when it comes to solutions. So just wanted to share that, and I hope other people have thoughts and ideas, but maybe we'd save it for later. But just figured I'd mention it quick.
No, great. Yeah, I again. Send your feedback. That was I thought we got a lot out of that session, and send your feedback. We had a lot to think about coming out of that. And I do agree with one thing. I agree with many things that people said, but one thing that Commissioner Agnew said that I want to bring out again is it would be great to be moving a little faster on this issue. So she brought that up, obviously when we were at the end of the program, but I'm 100% in agreement with that, as well as many things many people said. Did anyone else have any comments?
You guys are driven to park, right?
Okay. Any other comments? Chair has no other comments. Staff? Does staff have comments?
Just a quick update on the two big development projects that you all considered at your last meeting. The City Council held a public hearing on the 70th and France project. They will take action on that on December 15th. The 66th and France project was continued into January. The thought was having two large development projects like that for public hearing on the same agenda wasn't appealing. So that one was continued to January. So that one will go through the process at that time. And that is it for me.
Yeah, I think City Council saw how hard we worked one night and said, well, maybe we'll split these up.
Yes, and
I wish they would have thought of that sooner.
The December meeting agenda for the council was, there were many other big issues that they were dealing with that night as well.
Thank you. So that's everything. So that would be adjournment. We have to do a roll vote for adjournment. Ms. Olson, can you do that, please?
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
We have a motion. Thank you. Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Satisfied?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. And congratulations to Sheila Berube. And good night, everyone.